In this lecture on auditing, we're going to discuss the framework and theories of making ethical decisions. Ethical decisions are essential to audit quality. They enhance audit quality because, again, everything is based on the user's ability to rely and trust on us as auditors. So to make that quality ethical decision, you should be unbiased, and we've said that in several lectures, so understanding what's fair and what's right. You need to meet the expectation of a reasonable user. You're going to hear me say reasonable a lot, and I'll go into that in a little more detail along the way. And they comply with professional standards and practices when they're out doing the audit, and have gathered and incorporated sufficient and appropriate evidence to make that quality ethical decision. Next is professional skepticism, critically assessing evidence with a questioning mind, bringing attention to contradictory evidence that doesn't line up with other evidence that you've got. Seems odd that it doesn't. Question that. Bring attention to it. Carefully evaluate reliable evidence. Just because it looks reliable and seems reliable doesn't mean it is the original documents and that it can be relied on. So you want to reasonably evaluate the authenticity of those documents. You want to reasonably question the honesty and integrity of management, of individuals charged with governance, and also third-party evidence that you receive. I keep talking about reasonably. Well, ultimately, your decision and actions will be judged based on whether a reasonable person would make those same decisions or take that same action. So next is the framework of professional decision making. Step 1, you're going to define that audit problem that you've got. And step 2, you're going to assess the consequences of that problem and understand the decisions that could be made with that problem. You're going to assess the risk and uncertainties of that audit problem, and then evaluate the audit information that's out there that you can gather in the different alternatives. Now, after you've done that, do you feel confident we have reduced the risks of an incorrect assumption? And if the answer is no, then you've really got to go back and gather more information and kind of start the process over again. When you get to step 5 and you do feel you've had enough information so that you're not going to make an incorrect assumption, then you can make that best decision. So now this framework of professional decision making was adapted from Judgment and Choice by Robin Hogarth. So let's talk about the different theories. A couple theories really are out there. The first one is the Utilitarian Theory. And that defines ethical decisions as the action that achieves the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Essentially follows the framework of decision making by identifying the potential problem, identify possible courses of action, identify the direct and indirect impacts of each course of action. So what is going to happen if we do that, not only directly, but what are kind of the side effects and other things that could happen indirectly based on that course of action? Assess the value of all those impacts and identify the desirability of each action. What outcome would happen, and is that outcome aligning with the greater good of the greater number of people? Choose the action that does deliver that greatest good for the greatest number of people. And it reminds me of a Star Trek movie, the second one, and so you can tell I'm a Star Trek geek here a little bit. I loved The Wrath of Khan when it first came out, Star Trek number 2, where at the end Spock dies and they know he's done something to save the rest of the crew, and he says the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And essentially that's what the utilitarian theory is. Next is the rights theory. The rights theory really is based on actions that are fundamentally related to the rights of the parties that are involved. So those actions are assessed that way. So essentially, not all rights are equal. So higher order rights take precedence over lower order rights. And by that we mean higher order rights are your right to life, your right to autonomy, and your right to human dignity. That's the first and highest order of right, so that's what you want to satisfy when you're making decisions. The second order of rights include legal rights, the rights granted to you by the government, such as your civil rights, your property rights, your license privileges. Then the third order of rights include your social rights, your higher education, your good health care, earning a living. So those are the third order rights. So those are the main top 3 rights within the rights theory, because in fourth order is the non-essential ones, your personal taste. So that would be last on the totem pole in the rights theory. So in summary, let's take our ethical theories and apply them to our framework for decision making. So step 1, we identify the ethical issue. Step 2, we determine the affected parties and determine their rights. Step 3, we determine who has the most important rights. Step 4, we determine alternate courses of actions. And then step 5, we determine the consequences of each of those actions. So step 6, we apply both the utilitarian as well as the rights theories to eliminate courses of action that do not align with both or either theory, and we put values on that, so ultimately, when we get to step 7, we choose the best course of action that aligns best with both theories. So that's the best ethical decision. So I hope this discussion on framework and theories for making ethical decisions has been helpful.